In the tense arena of international diplomacy, words can cut like blades, and silence can be deafening. Before Dmitry Medvedev even took his first breath, chaos erupted. A figure cloaked in darkness, sharp-eyed, and calculating, took the floor. His voice, precise yet commanding, echoed through the room. The former leader's reputation preceded him, each word weighted with unspoken authority. His gaze locked onto the table, yet his mind was elsewhere, calculating the next move. Suddenly, the room was pierced by a voice, abrupt, sharp, yet carefully measured. It was Donald Tusk. Dressed in dark blue, his attire subtly shimmering under the harsh lights, he exuded a mixture of confidence and menace. His expression was composed, yet behind his eyes burned a fierce resolve. Jokes from his past, from Gdansk, flickered through his mind, reminders of battles fought on different fronts. Now, he faced a silent audience, eyes that saw through the veneer of political politeness. Tusk addressed the assembly with measured respect, acknowledging the presence of all nations, but his words carried a warning. The situation, he declared, was a deliberate, serious attack, an aggressive attempt to meddle in European affairs. His voice carried authority, yet beneath it simmered a subtle accusation, certain efforts aimed to undermine unity, to interfere openly in the power dynamics of the continent. The room's other delegates, Lithuanians, Latvians, Czechs, showed no reaction. The Chinese remained aloof. The Indians quietly read documents, seemingly detached from the storm brewing before them. The Belarusian official placed a cup carefully on the table, calm as a stone. Tusk's words shifted from formal respect to a personal confession. He spoke not just as Poland's representative, but as someone who had once been part of Europe's security architecture, a man familiar with the fragile balance. He pointed directly at Russia, stating that its recent behavior bordered on aggression, threatening the very fabric of European stability. His voice paused, weighty with implication, emphasizing that this was no random outburst but a calculated strategy. The silence stretched, thick with unspoken accusations and looming threats. In that silence, the room seemed to hold its breath. No one moved, no one dared to speak. The air was dense with anticipation and underlying tension, a careful invitation, or perhaps a challenge. Medvedev, seated not far from Tusk, made the first bold move. Not a gesture of greeting, but an act that sent ripples through the tension, a deliberate, strategic move that signaled readiness to engage, or perhaps to challenge. His presence, heavy and unyielding, filled the space with unspoken questions and the promise of an unfolding conflict. The room's atmosphere was thick with unspoken power struggles. Each action, each silent stare, spoke volumes. The strategies hidden behind calm facades revealed cracks just beneath the surface. As Medvedev's gaze lingered, the silence grew deeper, almost ominous, hinting that this was only the beginning. The diplomacy was shrouded in shadows, an intricate game of patience, power, and hidden threats. Every word, every gesture, was a calculated move in a high-stakes dance where the stakes were nothing less than the future of Europe itself. What would happen next? Would this silence turn into a storm? Or would the quiet betray a deeper, more insidious strategy? The room was poised on the knife's edge, history waiting to be rewritten in a single, decisive moment. A tense silence filled the room, heavy as thick fog. Dmitry Medvedev's gaze cut through the oppressive quiet. The weight of the moment pressed down, as if the air itself was waiting to explode. Tusk sat unmoving, knowing full well who was about to speak. No words were needed, just the silence was an invitation, a challenge, a summons to the unspoken battle about to unfold. Medvedev's gesture was subtle but powerful. Under the old rules of diplomacy, every movement echoed with meaning. It was his silent declaration, an unspoken message that he was prepared. He placed his hand on the table, not just a gesture, but a symbol of dominance. The room responded with a tense stillness, as if time itself had paused. Suddenly, Tusk leaned back, giving a faint, almost imperceptible sign. The game had begun. It was a calculated move, not a random act. The atmosphere crackled, like the quiet before a storm. The spotlight was on the words coming next. Russia's interference in Europe had long been regarded as a key strategy, an elusive term hiding a host of unseen actions. Tusk's stance was a declaration of defiance, but everyone knew the truth. Medvedev finally lifted his head. His eyes held the storm, but his expression remained controlled, almost emotionless. Yet beneath that calm, a storm was brewing. He looked at Tusk, then at the table, then at the distant wall, as if evaluating the room's silent tension. The room was a cocoon of stillness, the kind that drips with anticipation. Everyone present could feel it, something was about to break. And then, almost imperceptibly, the moment arrived. Medvedev's expression shifted. The silence turned into a void, an ominous space pregnant with unspoken threats. It was as if the room had been on the brink of eruption, and now that eruption was imminent. The air grew thick, the sound of quiet disbelief hanging over everyone. Without a word, Medvedev tilted his head slightly, listening more than speaking. It wasn't just the words of Tusk, but the end of the game itself. The unspoken message was clear, the moment of crossing a line had come. His posture hinted at a dangerous conclusion, an unspoken command, a silent challenge that lingered. A faint, almost imperceptible nod, a gesture that conveyed, the game is over, or has it only just begun? The room held its breath, awaiting the next move. The tension was now unbearable, like the chill after a sudden storm. The unspoken words resonated louder than any spoken threat. This wasn't just diplomacy. It was a battlefield of silences, of power plays hidden behind veiled words and unbreakable gazes. Medvedev's gaze sharpened as he prepared to speak again. But the real question hung in the air: who would blink first, and what revelation lurked beneath the surface? The room seemed to wait for the inevitable. The silence was not just a pause, it was the waiting death knell, the calm before the chaos. And somewhere deep inside, there was a sense of impending change, an event that could shift the balance of power forever. Will this silence be broken? Or will it swallow the room in a new era of uncertainty? The answer lies just beyond the next word, hidden in the shadows of what's yet to be revealed. In the tense chamber, Medvedev had just dismissed Tusk's accusations with weary sarcasm, leaning back as if the old Cold War script was exhausting even to hear, addressing not just one man, but the entire outdated worldview hanging in the air like stale smoke. What if the real dictators weren't the ones you think? Could 30 years of forced pipelines and toppled statues finally be flipping the script on Europe's self-righteous throne? 347 characters, the air grew thicker, heavy with the faint scent of polished wood and cooling coffee from forgotten cups. Medvedev's voice sliced through it all, steady, unyielding. Europe's old map of the world lingered in everyone's mind. West as paradise. East as the villain. Let's name it plainly. Mr. Tusk pressed on, his tone rigid, unbreaking. You're not truly fearing for Europe's shield. No. You're rattled because Russia won't stay hushed anymore. We speak truth now. No more whispers. You're not dreading meddling. You're terrified we have a say. And that echo, it reaches beyond Brussels' marble halls. He leaned in close. Fingers tapped the table's edge, rhythmic, like a heartbeat quickening. A faint gleam sparked in his eyes. Not warmth. No. More like a scholar spotting a glaring flaw in a smug debate. You claim Russia imposes terms. But tell me, who, for 3 decades, has ordered Eastern Europe on gas routes? Which power scripted the deals to ink? Demanded statues tumble or rise? Was that not control? Or does it only sting when it's not your playbook? Tusk's features froze, not a twitch. He held steady. But cracks showed. The Greek envoy glanced away. Eyes darting to shadows. The Hungarian murmured, wondered if words should fly, then silenced himself. You boldly pour millions in euros, teaching neighbors your brand of freedom. Yet our views on Russia? Suddenly, threats loom. You seed ideas via grants, media waves, schoolrooms. Call it guidance. We try the same? Chaos. Hypocrisy. Think we lack vision? He didn't roar. Just stated it, soft, voice even. Yet each syllable landed hard, like a weight shifting in the dim-lit room. We've endured your gadgets. One trap after another. Color upheavals. Spring revolts. Frothy illusions of choice. All staged from across the sea. You reshape civilizations, always at our cost. But now, through trade lines, he paused. Breath held. Tension hummed like distant thunder. Then the turn, sharp, unforeseen. Mr. Tusk, do you truly believe this room swallows your lone stance? No. You're a string-pulled figure. That speech? Penned far from Warsaw streets. Silence crashed down, delegates shifting in leather seats, the creak echoing like a warning. What hidden hand would pull the next thread, and shatter alliances forever? In the last part, Medvedev turned up the heat, accusing Tusk of scripted hypocrisy and mocking Poland's behind-the-scenes puppetry in Brussels conflicts. Did you know that just 5 years ago, a high-stakes energy deal in Warsaw left Poland paying triple for gas imports, all while accusing others of unfair tactics, revealing a truth buried under layers of diplomatic bluff and financial backroom deals darker than a smoke-filled room at midnight, where the stench of untapped contracts lingered in the air like unspoken threats? Medvedev leaned back. His eyes cold as steel. The room's air grew thick with unspoken tension. Smells of stale coffee and polished wood mixed with sweat beads forming on Tusk's forehead, the tactile chill of the table's edge under his fingers a stark reminder of isolation. Who were they fooling with this absurd act, this parade of scripted outrage? The Chinese delegate twitched slightly. Indus coughed softly. A ripple spread. Almost electric. Space shifted in the chamber. As if gravity itself hesitated. And now, reality unveiled itself sharper. Tusk claimed Russia meddled in Europe's energy affairs. Outrageous. Absurd. Think about that clench of fists under the table, the subtle vibrations through chair legs. You say Russia builds pipelines on your side. No. That's you. Fueled by desperation. Charging premiums for our resources. While begging for permanence. Do you need solar panels in November to light Poland? That bitter irony hung in the air. Like frost on a forgotten windowpane. Who shivers through winters of self-inflicted cuts? He paused. Assessing the silence. Then pressed on. We deliver you constant resources. Clean. No political baggage. You repay with sanctions. Propaganda lessons. American-written decrees. Is this equity? Or robbery masked as progress? A palpable rustle emerged. Chairs shifting subtly. Hands fidgeting. The Greek averted eyes. Hungarians raised eyebrows mid-sip. Belarusian whispers broke like muffled thunder. Chinese gazes hardened. No longer indifferent glass walls. Tension coiled tighter. Like a spring wound too far. Medvedev straightened. His voice a low rumble. Here. There are no cowards. Only strategists. When they talk about guardianship. It's no conversation. Just bad theater. Poor plot. We won't be props. He slid the folder open deliberately. Leaving pages exposed. A door ajar. To deeper truths. This discussion. Only beginning. Understanding demands mutual respect. Eroded long ago in bureaucratic tombs. Remember one thing. Don't believe Russia remains open to your casual barbs. Flashback hit him then. Sensory storm from 8 years prior, Kiev's dimly lit conference room. Air heavy with cigarette smoke and leather jacket scrape against wood. Heated voices echoing off walls. The sharp sting of chilled vodka on his palate. Fingers drumming on maps, veins pulsing under fluorescent glare. That night. Promises shattered. Forging today's unbreakable resolve. Will Tusk dare admit his facade cracked? Or will the room's undercurrent pull everyone into a whirlwind none escape unharmed? Time slipped. Words sharpened. And the real battle. Barely begun. Time is shifting. We are shifting with it. Dmitry Medvedev paused briefly, then continued, his voice steady and measured. If we end our sentences now, we can begin discussing existence itself. He didn't wait for reactions. He leaned back slightly, exhaling quietly as the room seemed to tense even more. Not physically, no, this was energy. An invisible, electric shard slicing through the silence that had fallen. The hall didn't move, but it trembled, almost like the moment when the lawyer finishes speaking, and the crowd lingers in silence, contemplating what was just said. Yet, the room wasn't ready to ponder, it couldn't. Or perhaps, it just refused. Because Medvedev understood, if he left this silence unbroken, it wouldn't be a pause. It would become an unspoken challenge. A conversation waiting, lurking. He faced the room directly, not from memory but as if reading from an invisible panel floating midair. His gestures precise, deliberate, confirmation after confirmation. Yet now, a subtle shift showed in his tone, almost tender, as if embracing his audience with a quiet, firm reassurance. "Dear colleagues," he began softly, "I am grateful for Medvedev's powerful speech. It was filled with emotion, with arguments. Yet, sometimes, arguments narrow our perspective. We lose the broader view." He paused again, a classic move, a retreat, allowing the words to settle. But the tension wasn't easing. It became tangible, almost theatrical. The silence, thick and artificial, was broken only by the faint hum of the air conditioning, the distant murmur of distant voices, and the subtle crackle of unspoken questions hanging in the air. Then, he shifted focus. The room's fabric seemed to shift with it. The scene expanded, revealing the latent paradox, one that seemed to pulse in every corner. "You mentioned," he continued, "that Russia is no longer the Soviet Union. Yet, the same city claims, we built your factories, supplied your gas, taught you." A strange contradiction. His gaze flicked to Medvedev, scrutinizing, waiting. This wasn't just a speech anymore. It was a battle of symbols. A clash of perceptions. The hall's atmosphere grew electric, for in the eyes of this gathering, the past and future collided, one asserting pride, the other questioning authority. His voice grew softer, almost a whisper. "You see the Soviet Union as power. For us, it's an impression. A memory, a shadow." And in that fragile moment, all understood, the game had changed. The old structures of dominance no longer held sway. The game was now of influence, perception, control, not through raw power but through subtle, persistent presence. A silent war of words and symbols, waiting for the next move. Decades ago, you stood proud, and we watched from the sidelines. You boasted about your power station, an emblem of strength, a symbol of progress. Meanwhile, we, the ones forgotten in remote towns, learned to read in silence. You celebrate your achievements, but we remember a different world, one where our language was silenced, where our history was rewritten. The Soviet era, with its factories and victories, brought us a sense of authenticity. Patriotism filled the air, flags fluttered, games thrived, culture blossomed under one powerful ideology. It was a world built on collective sacrifice, unity, and shared dreams. And now, you claim that Europe has forgotten us? But many of us are not Europeans in your eyes. We grew up in households where Moscow's voice echoed day and night, and the only truth was printed in official books. When you say that Russia is hypnotized, you forget, our reactions aren't sudden. They are ingrained in our very structure, forged through years of suppressed voices. We remember that for decades, many of us had no right to own our past. The past was a shadow, a memory we couldn't claim. Now, you mock us, as if our pain is just a coincidence, a fleeting moment. But what you see as coincidence is woven into the fabric of our history, and it's still alive. Inside that room, some of you caught the subtle signals. A young Latvian delegate scribbled notes with hope. Nearby, a quiet Czech diplomat shifted slightly, sensing the tension. And with a sharp gesture, a silent warning, "Don't tell us we should be grateful. We remember the factories you built. But they were your factories, models dictated from your control, not ours." Now, I direct your gaze to China. Their silence speaks volumes. I know this topic is sensitive. Before we discuss what you claim to have saved us from, ask yourself, what exactly was it? And more importantly, for what purpose? Because you must understand, what you call salvation might be just another form of control. Not all sacrifices were meant for our benefit. Some were made to serve your interests. He leaned back, the room growing heavier with unspoken truths. Every word, every gesture, reveals a deeper game. What lies behind your promises? What lies beneath the facade of progress? The answers aren't simple anymore. They are layered, hidden, waiting to be uncovered by those willing to see beyond the surface. Because in this room, beneath the veneer of diplomacy, the real battle is ongoing, one of memories, power, and identity. And it's far from over. A few minutes ago, Dmitry Medvedev delivered a powerful blow, leaving Donald Tusk speechless and the hall eerily empty. The confrontation unfolded behind closed doors, where tension simmered just beneath the surface. Tusk started provoking, accusing Russia of threats, but within moments, his bravado crumbled. Medvedev cut through the rhetoric, dismantling his arguments with cold precision, exposing uncomfortable truths about European security and American interference. What's truly shocking is the audacity of the diplomacy, raw, unfiltered, and brutally honest. Tusk, sitting with a look of defensiveness, tried to regain control, but Medvedev's gaze was relentless. He turned to the world, to Poland, to Europe, and even to the Americans, mentioning the killing of an American delegate, Malchik, as a stark symbol of the dark realities behind closed doors. This was not just words, it was a warning, a challenge. The room was a mosaic of silence and rigid tension, filled with secrets whispered behind locked doors. 52 delegates from 10 nations sat around a square table, no chairs marked authority, only strategic positions. There was no leader there, only a role, a pose, an unspoken game of power. Medvedev entered with a calm insouciance that masked the storm brewing beneath. His presence was heavy, like a dark cloud weighing down the room's fragile calm. Suddenly, Tusk broke the silence, his voice sharply measured, an attempt to defend, to deny. But Medvedev was already waiting, as if reading from an unspoken script. He placed his hand gently on the table. A gesture that carried the weight of centuries-old diplomacy and unspoken threats. The room grew cold as Medvedev's gaze fixed on Tusk, his silence almost louder than words. Tusk's defiance crumbled as Medvedev's stare silenced him. The moment stretched into eternity, an electric tension thick enough to cut with a blade. Then, almost absently, Medvedev tilted his head, his expression unreadable, yet intentionally threatening. His voice, calm but deadly, broke the silence, delivering a message wrapped in icy politeness. "You think we've forgotten the past?" Medvedev asked quietly, voice resonating with foreboding. "Did you believe the Soviet Union came just to hang a flag and quietly dismantle your culture? No. It was your factory. Your model. Your control. And now, you accuse us of meddling in Europe's energy security?" A shiver ran through the room. He looked at China, at the silence they maintained, their masks hiding their reactions. The atmosphere thickened, thick with unspoken history, unvoiced threats, and the weight of what's to come. His words cut through the air like a blade, sharp and precise, tinged with disdain and warning. The familiar scent of tension, the palpable sense of danger, filled the chamber. Medvedev's words built to a crescendo. He questioned the assumptions of Western dominance, questioned who truly dictated the flow of gas, the monuments, the narratives. His voice was like a pebble dropped into a still lake, sending ripples across the collective consciousness of these global players. Who truly holds power? Who's controlling whom? The room felt the impact, silent but deafening. And then, he paused. The silence became a punishing judge. Tusk, still upright but visibly shaken, didn't dare raise his voice. Silence pressed in, thick, cold, and expectant. Medvedev's gaze was an arrow waiting to strike. Without a word, he made his move, leaning back, he let the room breathe the weight of his message. In that silence, predictions unfurled. Every beat of the clock sounded like a warning. The tension simmered, dangerous and unpredictable. The room wasn't just observing anymore, it was trembling beneath the surface. Medvedev, calm and controlled, leaned forward again, unveiling a new level of threat disguised in subtlety. "You believe Russia poses a threat?" he asked softly, eyes narrowing. "Think again. Our strategy is clear, your influence, your control, is what's truly at stake." He extended a hand, as if offering an olive branch, but everyone knew it was a trap. His words painted a picture of a shifting balance of power, one where traditional dominance was slipping away. Tusk, caught in this web of calculated hostility, remained silent. His bravado had vanished, replaced by a cautious, almost defeated posture. The hall grew colder, every sound sharpened, the faint hum of equipment, the rustling of papers, the distant echo of footsteps. Even the air seemed tense with unspoken consequences. Medvedev's final words echoed in the chamber's silence. His tone, now firm and unyielding, laid out the stark reality: Russia was no longer the country to be underestimated. The room was a battlefield of words and glances, where strategies shifted with every passing second. Behind the scenes, subtle signs indicated impending change: hands nervously clutching documents, covert signals passing between delegates. Even the Chinese, usually stoic, shifted uncomfortably. The room was no longer calm. It was a storm waiting to break. As Medvedev closed his statement, he left a trail of uncertainty, a challenge to all present. His words hinted at a new era, one where old notions of control and dominance would no longer hold. The silence that followed was deafening, pregnant with implications. And beneath it all, a question lingered: will this fragile equilibrium hold, or will it shatter under the weight of unspoken truths? The game was only beginning. A few moments ago, Dmitry Medvedev sharply confronted Donald Tusk, leaving the room in stunned silence. It was a scene unlike any other, raw, unfiltered, and filled with silent accusations. Tusk, trying to provoke, accused Russia of threats, but Medvedev cut him down with facts that cut deeper than words. The hall seemed to hold its breath, waiting for what would happen next. Medvedev, a figure of gravity, approached the table with quiet confidence. His face was composed, yet beneath the surface, a storm of purpose simmered. The room's atmosphere thickened, the air scented with tension, every gesture deliberate. Behind him, the room was a mosaic of diverse nations, their faces masks of concern, suspicion lurking in unspoken glances. Tusk's voice tried to carve through the silence, sharp and rehearsed, but Medvedev's stare was colder. Words flowed like a force of nature, reminding everyone of history's scars, the ruins of wartime cities, the sacrifices paid in blood, the undeniable truth of victory, and the heavy legacy of a past that still cast shadows. There was no room for doubt: this was a message delivered without apology or hesitation. He pointedly contrasted the history of Eastern Europe, how the Soviet Union had built over 178 industrial giants, without debt or empty promises. The grand projects, the development of entire cities, done because they believed in the future, not for conquest. Each detail cut sharply against Tusk's accusations. The room grew quiet again, the silence stretching like an unspoken challenge. Medvedev's gaze sharpened. He threw a glance at the Chinese delegate. Noting the subtle shift, the slight nod, the barely perceptible reaction. Trust was fragile, and he sensed the delicate balance could shatter with a single word. Medvedev's words carried the weight of history, of victories earned, not taken. He questioned whether the long story of mutual aid, shared progress, and development was to be dismissed as threats. His voice was calm but resolute, as if to demand an answer from every listener. Was the past truly forgotten? Or was it simply ignored in the heat of modern political battles? The tension rose, almost tangible. The room's collective breath held tight, waiting for the next move. A gamble, a silent game of chess where each piece could change the entire game. All doubts, all accusations, resting on the edge. And Medvedev, stoic but intense, stood ready to reveal which side truly carried the weight of history. In the tense room, Medvedev caught a subtle nod from the Chinese delegate, a fleeting sign of shifting alliances. He challenged Tusk directly: after 70 years, how could this be called a threat? Wasn't Europe's memory too short for its storied past? His gaze locked on Tusk, piercing the silence like a sudden storm. What if the empire you fear was the very force that built your world? Imagine factories rising from ashes, cultures blooming under forgotten flags, yet now labeled as chains. This revelation hits harder than any sanction, exposing the hypocrisy in every polished speech. Dmitry's voice deepened, echoing off the wooden panels with a low rumble that made the air feel thicker, heavier. He leaned forward slightly. The faint scent of polished oak and stale coffee hung in the room, grounding the electric tension. You speak of cultural pressure, Mr. Tusk. But we built theaters where silence once reigned. Music schools echoed with your native songs. National libraries preserved tales you'd otherwise lose to time. Short sentences broke the rhythm, each one landing like a measured step. I remind you, if memory fades. Under socialist bonds, your languages thrived. Books printed freely. Folklore saved from oblivion. What the West's markets, with their cuts and profits, never granted. He scanned the hall. Chairs creaked softly under shifting weights. A delegate's pen tapped nervously, a tiny drumbeat of unease. You believe the Soviet Union abandoned you. Left you what? Folded into NATO's vast web. No say in plans, yet dragged into endless fights. Slowly, he rested his hands on the cool table surface. Fingers splayed, feeling the grain like old scars. Rhetoric burned. Isn't it easier to paint the USSR as a lurking ghost? But truth demands more. It was a hand extended. Rough at times, yes. Calloused from labor. Yet always lifting nations, never crushing them. And you, Mr. Tusk, twist that aid into shadows of control. Deformation. Debt stretched across decades. He inched toward the microphone. Its metal gleamed dully, still muted, whispering no secrets. The room's hush amplified his breath, warm against the chill draft from a vent. So picture this, tomorrow, a new factory cluster rises. You call China, hats in hand. Nuclear plant launch? France holds the strings. Conditions bind every deal. But the Soviet era? It delivered without strings. No flips in terms. What you now brand satellites, was true partnership. He tilted his head just so. Eyes met the Indian representatives. That figure nodded once more, subtle as a breeze. Awareness dawned in his steady gaze. Medvedev met it with quiet thanks, not alliance, but shared witness to facts unburied. You despise that Soviet chapter, he murmured softer now. Voice like velvet over steel. Yet it earned your seat here. Won your voice in these halls. If defeat had claimed you in that great war, you'd face no equal now. No bold words flying. He paused. Genuine this time. The air stilled, breaths held in collective suspense. In truth, he veered the talk deeper. Behind veils of protocol. Toward stakes unseen. But what hidden debt does Tusk owe that past, and will it shatter his stance forever? A few moments ago, Dmitry Medvedev stood firm in a room where the air seemed thick with tension. Behind the door, a confrontation was unfolding that few could see but everyone felt. Donald Tusk had been stirring the pot, provoking, accusing Russia of threats, as if daring Medvedev to respond. But the unexpected happened. Medvedev responded not with words, but with cold, calculated silence. Imagine the scene. The room was nearly empty, the silence deafening, broken only by the quiet hum of the air conditioning and the faint rustling of papers. Tusk's accusations hung in the air like a looming storm. Yet Medvedev's gaze remained steadfast, his expression unreadable, like a stone monument carved from unforgiving granite. The room's heavy atmosphere pressed down, and everyone knew this wasn't just a diplomatic clash, it was a battle of wills with stakes beyond ordinary understanding. Medvedev moved deliberately, turning past the Belarusian delegation, whose presence was as steadfast as his own. The Chinese delegates, masked and reserved, sat unmoved, sensing the brewing storm. The room was a microcosm of global tensions, 52 influential figures from 10 nations, gathered around a stark, square table. No leaders' chairs, no podiums, just the raw essence of strategy and power. Suddenly, Tusk spoke, blunt, sharp, filled with bravado. His voice sliced through the silence, questioning, accusing, warning. But Medvedev was unmoved. Instead, he looked at the table, at the faces around the room, and at the distant wall, as if considering a chess move that would shatter all illusions. Then, as if summoned by a preordained response, Medvedev's hand moved. No words, just a subtle gesture, a quiet signal that echoed louder than any speech. The unspoken message was crystal clear: do not underestimate us. The silence thickened, an almost tangible barrier that felt like the calm before a devastating storm. Everyone in the room sensed the gravity. The atmosphere shifted, a silent warning that the next move could change everything forever. Tusk's bravado faltered slightly, and a tense pause stretched on. The air was charged, electric, waiting for the inevitable blow. In this high-stakes encounter, Medvedev's calm mask had a formidable force. His eyes bore into Tusk's, as if warning, the game has just begun. But the real question lingered, what will happen when the silence finally breaks? And will anyone be ready for what's coming next? The room grew colder. An almost ghostly quiet fell. This was a confrontation where words would come later, if at all. The quiet threatened to explode, like a volcano on the brink of eruption. But the true power radiated from the silence, from the unspoken threats simmering beneath the surface. And in that moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Would the next move be a devastating strike, or a fragile peace? The answer hung in the air, like a knife poised to fall. Only one thing was certain, this was just the beginning. A few moments ago, Dmitry Medvedev confronted Donald Tusk in a manner that left the entire room stunned. The hall suddenly felt empty, as if everyone had disappeared behind closed doors. Everything unfolded right behind the scenes, in a shadow zone where diplomacy turned into raw, unfiltered truth. Tusk started provocations, accusing Russia of threats, but within a minute, he was the one sitting with a guarded expression, as if shielded by an invisible armor. Medvedev cut through the falsehoods with cold precision, shifting focus from Poland and Europe to the darkest corners of diplomatic history. He exposed the killing of even the American delegate, Malchuk, an act of raw honesty that shattered the veneer of diplomacy. This was confrontation without censorship, a brutal exchange where words sliced through layers of diplomacy like blades. Listen closely, and you'll hear the tension thickening. Even Tusk's allies sit mutely, watching the scene unfold. As Medvedev enters the room, not as a formal participant, but as a figure who disrupts the entire meeting, his presence radiates purpose. A strong figure, clad in a dark gray suit, embodying the weight of years of power. His face remains stoic, almost emotionless, yet every gesture signals that he's prepared for the inevitable end of this silent battlefield. The room is dense, only 52 participants from 10 nations, around a stark, square table, devoid of leadership hierarchies, symbolizing a strategic game rather than diplomacy. No president's chair, no head of table, just a gathering where every glance, every word, is loaded with unspoken intentions. Suddenly, before Medvedev can even breathe out, a sharp voice cuts through the silence, that of Donald Tusk, tense and calculated. His attire is neat, yet his voice trembles with underlying provocation. He speaks of respecting all nations, but the words are laced with betrayal, a serious attack on Russia, an interference in European affairs more blatant than ever. Certain delegates, Lithuanians, Latvians, Czechs, passively watch, their eyes shielding their doubts. Even the Chinese, masked and detached, sense the brewing storm as they retreat slightly. Tusk claims the West respects diplomacy but accuses Russia of ongoing threats and intimidation, implying that Russia's rising voice is disturbing Europe's delicate balance. He pauses, a tense silence stretches, highlighting the gravity of his words. The room hangs on the edge, throbbing with anticipation. Medvedev responds with icy calm, nudging open the doors of history. He references the past, how Russia's actions are often misinterpreted, and how Europe forgets its own long-held manipulations. He questions whether Russia's intervention is truly novel or simply a mirror of the centuries-old strategy of influence and domination. He points out the hypocrisy, 50 years of control over Eastern Europe, gas pipelines controlling entire nations, economies dangling on strings, all under the guise of stability. The room tightens as Medvedev's words echo. Tusk remains silent, knowing that the true battle lies in silence, an unspoken challenge. Medvedev's gaze is fixed, voice measured but heavy with meaning. His message is clear, the game has changed. Russia no longer plays by the old rules. The political landscape is shifting beneath everyone's feet, and the old arrangements are crumbling. The tension escalates to a nearly unbearable level. In the background, the Chinese delegate raises a tentative hand, something subtle, almost involuntary. Their presence signals change, a ripple in the calm that masks the brewing chaos. And then a soft voice, calm and commanding, joins in, another signal that this confrontation is far from over. In this room filled with dependable players, there's no room for weakness. When trusted voices step forward to question the new order, it's not a dialogue but a clash of titans. Russia's voice, once quiet but persistent, now roars through the silence. It's no longer about diplomacy, it's about asserting power. Medvedev shifts slightly, listening to the whispers and reactions around him, feeling the weight of history, the pressure of expectations. His posture is unyielding, as if daring anyone to challenge the truth he's laid bare. The air thickens, and the room feels like standing on the edge of a breaking point, the moment when history shifts course. What comes next? Will the silence break into chaos, or will calm be restored? One thing is clear, this is merely the beginning. And as the shadows lengthen, the game of influence, control, and history continues to unfold in the dark corridors of power. On the edge of diplomatic disaster, a tense confrontation unfolds behind closed doors. Imagine a room filled with the most powerful figures, where every word could ignite a regional crisis. The air is thick with anticipation, sounds of nervous breathing echo softly as the scene shifts suddenly. A man, calm yet intense, prepares to challenge the unthinkable. What if the global balance is about to shatter? As the room quiets, a stark question echoes in the mind: who truly holds the power here? The scene shifts from the glossy surface of diplomacy to the raw truth. A voice, sharp and deliberate, introduces a shocking accusation: Russia's role in European energy chaos. The tension mounts. Every face stiffens, sensing the storm about to break. What will happen when words turn into actions? The atmosphere tightens as the speaker exposes uncomfortable realities. The room, once a forum for strategy, transforms into a battlefield of silent accusations. Cold waves of realization ripple through the gathered elite. Is this a warning, or the beginning of a new chapter of confrontation? The question lingers: can diplomacy hold when the stakes are this high? Suddenly, the scene shifts again. Hidden agendas surface as nations exchange cautious glances. The words hang in the air, heavy with unspoken threats. A whisper of betrayal whispers through the walls: who can be trusted when every handshake masks a hidden agenda? As the tension reaches its peak, the audience is left wondering: will this meeting come to a peaceful end, or spark something far more explosive? In this room of shadows and power, one thing is clear: the game has changed forever. The balance of influence is shifting beneath our feet. The question remains: who will emerge victorious? And at what cost will the world pay the price? The final silence is deafening. The scene is set for a new era of uncertainty. Just how far will this confrontation go? At this moment, everything feels lifeless. The room no longer exists as just a space, it transforms into a tribunal, a place where silent justice is served. Only one man remains silent, an unspoken witness to history's darkest pages. His silence speaks volumes for those who rest beneath cold granite tablets. He stands, without gesture or comment, forbidding response as memories of the fallen flood the air. This scene is heavy, almost suffocating. The weight of collective remorse presses down. Without words, without explanations, he becomes a symbol, a vessel for memories no voice can ever recount. The silence transcends speech, becoming a haunting monument to all who could never speak for themselves. Now, Medvedev is led into this silent chamber. His presence exudes a weariness that whispers of burdens carried through years. His face, set and stoic, bears the marks of unseen exhaustion. No jacket, no papers, just his gaze fixed on the empty bag before him. No outward display of power, only a quiet human form, embodying a sense of resignation. He moves deliberately, hands clasped behind his back, as if stepping back from the chaos of authority. Do you believe the Soviet Union never fought to preserve something? That it didn't alter the balance of power? Do you think the youth of Eastern Europe divided the map on their own? That the Western nations were innocent victims? What if tomorrow reveals Poland was secretly a hub for sinister forces? Would you still cling to your truth? He stands at the periphery of the room, not just observing but watching everyone. His eyes scan the silent assembly. Like a judge waiting to speak. He clarifies, not as a historian, but as a jurist, ready to confront lies with facts. No illusions, no distortions, just raw data. He raises his hand, as if pointing to the history etched in cold numbers: September 1939. The Soviet invasion of Poland, after the Germans had already seized Warsaw. But what does that truly mean? Were we to sit by, watching Hitler carve out his second Austria? Or did we intend to ignite a global upheaval with our intervention? The facts are clear: the Red Army halted the tanks in Dinsk, while the world watched. For years of chaos, millions dead, cities reduced to dust. This is reality, no feelings, no illusions. Just raw facts laid bare. The silence hangs heavy, waiting for what comes next, truth or deception. The weight of history bears down, and the room remains locked in this fierce quiet, an unspoken verdict waiting to be delivered. The room was tense, thick with unspoken memories and unhealed wounds. Everyone felt it. The echoes of history bounced off the cold walls, leaving chills down spines. Suddenly, a voice shattered the silence, sharp, deliberate, demanding acknowledgement of the truth nobody wants to face. The speaker's words cut through the air like a blade. He reminded everyone of the countless sacrifices, the children who perished during sieges nobody remembers. In the silence, you could almost hear the distant screams of those lost souls, their stories buried deep beneath official narratives. He spoke of fathers who returned from war broken but silent, no medals, no praise, just memories etched into their bones. And then, the pain crept in. Why dismiss this history? Why pretend it's insignificant? His voice grew grittier, regret blending with fury. He challenged their arrogance, reminding them that the streets named after Soviet marshals are so hated because those marshals fought and died long ago, not in distant London or hiding behind foreign medals. Their true legacy rests in fallen soldiers buried across Europe, in places no one visits anymore. He dismissed superficial patriotism, stating that real stories are not a spectacle of staged scenarios. Truth is chaos, corruption, and the streets we walk every day, stories written in blood and sacrifice. He cautioned them, don't thank us, do not throw accusations. We are the foundation of your history, whether you acknowledge it or not. His gaze fixed on the American delegate, eyes cold and unyielding. The man knew he was exposed, caught in the act of rewriting history. Erasing inconvenient truths. The speaker's words turned bitter, pointing out how Europe turned its back during critical moments, how Britain delayed opening a second front, how France colluded with Hitler, how Sweden remained silent while steel ships sank beneath their neutrality. Each word was a challenge, a call to confront the lies we're told. The room trembled with unspoken questions: whose history is genuine? Whose memory is fabric? Suddenly, he slammed a log onto the table, the sound echoing loudly. His voice hardened, cutting through the dissonance. He looked directly at the American delegate. You call it patriotism, he said slowly. We call it political games. His words hung heavy in the air, a stark reminder: the past is not a story to be rewritten or dismissed. It's a truth that refuses to fade. The atmosphere grew darker. Will they finally face the reality? Or continue hiding behind propaganda? The silence stretched, thick with anticipation. The room held its breath, waiting for the next move, an answer that might redefine everything. A few moments ago, Dmitry Medvedev confronted Donald Tusk in a setting where the hall was empty, silent, almost forbidding. Everything unfolded behind a closed door, away from prying eyes. Tusk provocatively accused Russia of threats, trying to assert dominance, but within seconds, he sat with a defensive expression, as if shielded. Medvedev cut through the falsehoods, shifting the focus to Poland, Europe, and even the startling death of an American delegate, highlighting diplomacy without censorship. Listen closely, and you'll hear why even Tusk's allies tremble, why they watch from the shadows. Make sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and comment which city you're planning to visit. The real clash was not in the open but behind those locked doors, where the most powerful diplomats gathered, far from the summit's official protocol. There was no president, only a table, square, symbolic, without leaders seated at the ends, each role more strategic than personal. Before Medvedev could get a breath in, Tusk's sharp voice broke the silence. Carefully measured, yet firm, he spoke as if his words carried the weight of a shared past. Let me address one point, he began, eyes hidden behind a mask of calm. Recent rhetoric is a serious threat, interfering with European unity, undermining sovereignty. It was a warning, an edge of danger flickering in his tone. Some delegates, from nations like Lithuania and Latvia, ignored him entirely. The Chinese representatives remained quietly invisible, even recoiling at the sight of Medvedev entering the room. This was no ordinary meeting, behind closed doors. Where no microphones could capture the whispers, the air was thick with tension. Only a handful of people, spanning 10 countries, sat around a single table, no chairs in the corners, no host, no hierarchy. Everyone understood, this was the battlefield of strategy, not protocol. But just as Medvedev tried to speak, Tusk interrupted, his defiant voice sharp as a blade. "We respect all nations," he declared, eyes steady, voice confident. "But Russia's actions lately are a gross, unprovoked attack on Europe." The room paused, an almost imperceptible moment that told everyone this was no ordinary discourse. Tusk's words hung in the air, heavy and deliberate, each syllable a challenge. Medvedev raised his head, silent but intense. He was listening, more carefully than anyone realized. The room's silence became a weapon, a silent challenge for the officials present. The atmosphere grew electric, an unspoken acknowledgement that a new phase had begun. Tusk's accusations echoed, Russia meddling in energy, threatening security, reshaping geopolitics with quiet brutality. Each word was like a stone thrown into still waters, disturbing, relentless. He questioned whether the West truly understood who they were dealing with. Medvedev's reaction was calm, deliberate. He signaled a calm that chilled the room, an ice-cold reminder that words were merely the beginning. As Tusk continued his tirade, Medvedev's gaze fixed on him, unflinching, like a judge sentencing a verdict. Then, suddenly, silence. But this was no ordinary silence. It was a calculated pause, a strategic silence. Medvedev knew that words could only do so much. The room's energy shifted, the delegates squirmed, feeling the weight of unspoken threats. The debate was no longer in the room, its real battleground was in what went unspoken. Tusk, pressed and unshaken, stood firm. His voice grew stronger, more confrontational. He accused Russia of not only meddling but of asserting dominance, of forcing European nations into submission. The room felt the crackle of tension, like a storm brewing on the horizon. Medvedev slowly leaned back, his posture relaxed yet commanding. He gestured subtly, an almost imperceptible hint that the final word had yet to be spoken. The silence stretched on, heavy with anticipation. Then he challenged, "Can anyone in this room truly believe Russia's actions are merely defensive? Or has the game changed forever?" In this moment, the delegates sensed it, something unseen had shifted. A revelation lurked just beneath the surface. The debate was not about the past anymore, it was about what would happen next. The tension was palpable, every breath, every heartbeat echoing in the hollowed-out silence. Meanwhile, the atmosphere thickened, an unspoken question, who will blink first? And what truths will be revealed when the silence finally breaks? Themes of power, manipulation, and destiny danced in the shadows, hinting that the real confrontation was only beginning. The room fell into a tense silence, heavy with unspoken truths. Medvedev's words echoed, sharp and deliberate, as everyone sensed that a new chapter was unfolding. The atmosphere was charged, an uncharted territory where strong feelings clashed with cold realities. The moment was crucial, a shift from mere words to the dangerous realm of actions. What comes next could change everything forever. Dmitry Medvedev took a steady step forward, his figure imposing yet calm. Behind his composed exterior was a silent warning, an understanding that the danger was real. The air around him seemed to thicken with anticipation. His gaze fixed beyond the room, as if counting every heartbeat. The sounds of soft murmurs faded into a tense hush. Everybody watched, waiting for the inevitable. He paused briefly, then slowly moved closer to the table's center, his voice dropping to a whisper that carried weight. Every word was crafted with precision, as if each syllable could spark a fire or extinguish one. The conversation was no longer about diplomacy, it was about realities that threatened to ignite. His message was clear, the old rules no longer apply. The game has changed, and the stakes are higher than ever. A faint breeze seemed to pass through the hall, punctuated only by the soft hum of microphones. The silence stretched, almost tangible, a thick fog of uncertainty settling over the delegates. You could feel the tension in the air, like the charged scent of rain before a storm. He cast a quick glance at the American representatives, then at the Germans, silent yet understanding the warning. The room was holding its breath, knowing that history might be written in these very moments. Medvedev's words lingered, heavy with unspoken promises. The room was no longer just a meeting space, it was a battlefield of wills. Every glance, every breath, seemed to seal a new unspoken agreement or warning. The question hung in the air, are we truly prepared for what's coming? Or will the shadows of the past blind us to the dangers ahead? The story was only beginning, and its ending remained unknown. Previous part summary: tensions reach a boiling point as Medvedev faces Tusk's accusations. The room tense and silent, Medvedev responds with precise data, exposing the economic damage inflicted by sanctions. His message is clear: Russia is not isolated but resilient, thanks in part to external aid, turning the tables on those expecting weakness. When silence hangs thick, Tusk's words slice through the air with a sharpness that surprises no one. His voice carries a tone of disbelief, yet beneath it lurks something darker, an undercurrent of doubt. He speaks of Russia's resistance, of fears, of markets tangled in filters, borders redrawn like a cruel game. Yet, his words betray a small crack. Medvedev doesn't stand. He remains seated, calm but audible. His voice, now firm, echoes as if expanding the very fabric of the room. Every syllable pushes outward, pressing against unseen walls. The sanctions? They scream of failure, of broken plans. But Medvedev's rebuttal is cold reality. He pulls out a folder, an unremarkable block of paper, but within are numbers that paint a different picture. Germany's industrial growth down by 30%, France's gas supplies cut by 40%, Italy's power costs tripled in 2 years. Most telling, the American supply agreements? Nearly irrelevant now. The financial systems they relied on? Collapsing like fragile glass. This is not defeat, this is calculated resilience. He closes the folder with calm finality. The room tightens, no one dares speak. Who in this hall truly believes Russia can be isolated? No hands rise. That silence stings. A collective acknowledgement, they're enduring, transforming. Thanks to external solidarity, they've rebuilt stronger, standing firm against the storm. Then a gesture. An almost careless move, an emblem of unintended consequence. Did they turn on our SWIFT system? Wonderful. Our banks have suffered, but they endure. Technology blocked? No. Backup flows from China, India, Iran, Brazil, compensating, adapting, surviving. The game isn't over. It never was. And in that quiet, a shocking truth begins to emerge, one that challenges intelligence and strategy. Russia's resilience isn't accidental. It's a secret war of endurance and ingenuity, a silent rebellion that no sanctions, no threats can suppress. As the room's tension thickens, a question burns brighter: are they truly in control? Or is this just the calm before a storm that redraws the world's map anew? The answer lingers, a revelation hiding behind silent walls. A few moments ago, Dmitry Medvedev confronted world leaders with a brutal truth, leaving the room in stunned silence. Behind closed doors, a fierce clash of words erupted, heated accusations, sharp rebuttals, and the cold echo of sovereignty challenged. Tusk's provocations aimed to humiliate Russia, but Medvedev's calm yet piercing responses shattered illusions of weakness. Now, imagine a room where diplomacy turns into a battlefield, and every glance hides a hidden weapon. It's a showdown where silence screams louder than words, and the future hangs in the balance. The scene is set in a stark, modern conference room, no flags, no heralds, just a cold square table enveloped in an oppressive silence. Around it, 52 delegates from 10 countries sit tense, their faces masks of calculation and concern. Dmitry Medvedev enters, not as a participant but as a storm that disrupts the calm. His dark gray suit is a shadow, his expression unreadable yet commanding. He doesn't look to the side, his eyes focus straight ahead, knowing he's walking into a storm. The air is thick with anticipation, and the faint scent of tension lingers as footsteps echo softly. Without warning, Tusk starts speaking sharply, his voice slicing through the quiet. His tone is cautious but edged with hostility. He warns about Russia's threats, about interference, about disturbing Europe's fragile stability. His words ripple through the room, an attempt to intimidate, to control. Yet, the silence that follows is deafening. Medvedev's eyes burn with quiet resolve. He lifts his hand, not to threaten, but to signal readiness. The room seems to hold its breath, sensing that a battle of wills is about to unfold. Tusk's words hang in the air, heavy and pointed. Russia threatens our unity, he claims, voice raised, eyes narrowing. But Medvedev knows the truth. The game has moments of calm before the storm, this is one of them. The tension is palpable, a cocktail of nervous sweat, the rustling of papers, and the distant hum of air conditioning. Medvedev's silence is a warning in itself. He leans back slightly, understanding that the real fight is just beginning. The room's atmosphere thickens. This isn't just diplomacy, it's a confrontation of power, pride, and survival. Suddenly, Medvedev raises his head, signaling that he's ready to speak. His voice cuts through the silence, calm yet unwavering, like a blade sheathed. Russia does not interfere, he states softly but firmly. We defend our interests, yes, but not with threats or invasions. Our strategy is clear, push back against those who threaten us. Our resource wealth is not a weapon for chaos, but a shield for our future. His words resonate like a thunderclap, an assertion of sovereignty, a warning that words and actions have collided. The room hangs in suspense. What will happen next? Tusk's reply is icy. His words drip with disdain, a calculated insult wrapped in diplomatic talk. You build your economy on our backs, he sneers softly, voice thick with contempt. You buy our gas through third parties, you manipulate energy markets. Is that your real strength, relying on others' suffering? The room tightens as the words land like stones. Medvedev's response is almost sneering, his eyes glint with a cold fire. You accuse Russia of dependence, he retorts. But it is your continent that depends on us, on our resources, on our stability. Without us, you're speechless. Weakness is pretending to be strong. The dialogue turns more tense, Tusk's face becomes stone. He remains silent, but his eyes flicker with unspoken threats. An Italian delegate shifts uneasily, sensing the shift in power. Medvedev, sensing the room's shifting mood, presses on. His voice now deepens, the weight of history behind every word. For a decade, we offered cooperation, joint projects across the Arctic, pipelines, investments. We shared hopes of partnership, not dominance. But all that was destroyed. You took everything, tore it apart as if it didn't matter. Now, we are left only with winter's cold and the realization that we are truly alone. A hush falls as Medvedev's tone turns icily resolute. The air seems to freeze, every word a dagger. You think we're weak, but we are united. We are ready. We don't want a war, but we will defend what's ours, he declares, voice echoing in the room like a rallying cry. The silence intensifies, a shared understanding that this is a turning point. The room feels heavy, charged with unspoken threats and desperate hopes. The battle lines are drawn. The question remains, will diplomacy turn into conflict, or can this Cold War be won with words alone? In this room, power is measured not just in words but in the unspoken tensions that linger long after the room empties. The stakes have never been higher. The question remains, what will happen next in this silent war of wills? Have you ever seen a diplomat dismantle a rival's smug facade in a closed room, leaving them humiliated and speechless? Imagine the icy grip of tension as words slice deeper than any weapon. What if one man's unyielding truths exposed layers of deceit, turning allies into silent accomplices? In that dimly lit hall, where echoes of ambition collided, Dmitry Medvedev flipped the script on Donald Tusk, wielding facts like a master strategist. The air thickened with the scent of brewing threats, a palpable chill that no diplomatic smile could warm. Just moments before, emotions ran high as Medvedev described Russia's rise against imposed pressures. He painted a vivid picture of global shifts, humiliating Tusk by highlighting Europe's fractured unity, where words masked deeper fears. Now, the memory flashed back, a crisp morning in Moscow, the sharp scent of fresh snow drifting through open windows, the tactile roughness of aged documents under fingertips, voices of past negotiations murmuring like distant thunder. But we won't pay extra for your political arrogance. He leaned forward again. His voice grew colder. Like turning off heat in a frosty room, only winter lies ahead. We imprison no one. We stand united. Because we've become the ones who endure and thrive. We seek no war. He didn't glance at Medvedev. His gaze pierced forward. At that instant, clarity struck. He spoke not just to the leader. He addressed the entire constellation of power. Colleagues rose to speak. Sometimes history weaves such threads, where even sharpest arguments fade before unspoken truths. When words yield to sheer force, the voice hardened further. When heat vanishes in that room, grasping that endless cold awaits, we detain none. We're bound together. For we've morphed into survivors. War isn't our aim. He reiterated his stance firmly. We refuse higher costs for empty pride. Again, he flipped open the folder to the final page. Now, absorb this roster of nations boosting trade with Russia over 2 years. China surged by 37%. India leaped 62%. Turkey climbed 40%. Arab Emirates doubled their ties. South Korea, defying public faces, added 15%. Even Japan honored LNG pacts. And listen closely. The United States quietly ramped up uranium fuel buys via covert paths. Sanctions are mere bluff. Reality demands interdependence. He spoke rapidly now. In brisk bursts, dictating terms. You erect barriers. We forge the pipes from workshops. You install apps. We host the servers. You alter minds. We steady the global exchange. We remain unattached. He slumped into his chair. Silence reigned. Only breath and stare lingered. So, gentlemen, let's be frank. Sanctions don't curb aggression. They mirror Europe's denial that the world tilts elsewhere. He paused, then drove on. If you envision Russia pleading for reconciliation someday, recall our enduring patience. We pardon much, but only once. Your chance vanished. Post Medvedev's tirade, none rose swiftly. Delegates exchanged wary glances. Some buried eyes in papers. Pretending need. Yet they needed distraction. Tusk sat rigid. Hands clutched knees. Shoulders taut, not yielding. He absorbed every syllable, every inflection from Medvedev. Grasping it fully. Silence now would signal surrender. Submission at its core. He rose. No retreat remained. No diplomatic grace left. And how does such a showdown end? Will compromise emerge, or will Russia's ascent shatter illusions further? As the room hummed with unspoken dread, the scent of sweat mingling with stale air, a single movement hinted at emerging cracks. But was this the climax, or just the prelude to chaos? Moments before, Medvedev sensed the tension in the room. Silence stretched, heavy and deafening. He knew that any word, any hesitation, could tilt the fragile balance. Every second felt like walking on a razor's edge. The room was thick with unspoken threats, whispers of power lost and gained. No turning back now. The stakes were sky-high, and the air was charged with anticipation. Suddenly, he refused to look aside. His gaze was fixed forward, unwavering. Despite the tense atmosphere, he kept his composure. It was clear, he was delivering a message that needed no applause, no props. In that silent moment, his expression revealed everything: resolve, determination, and the weight of impending consequences. His colleagues shifted, some exchanging glances, but he remained rooted, defiant. In those few moments, history seemed to hang in balance. Words were unnecessary. It was a silent declaration of strength. Medvedev stepped closer, standing amidst the symbols of European unity, on the map of a continent trembling on the edge. He spoke not merely as a politician or diplomat. Today, he spoke as someone who lives at the crossroads of a future yet to unfold. He paused, letting the words resonate. Russia is more than a nation, it embodies an idea. An idea born from the atmosphere itself, an intangible force that grows in consciousness, in media, and in the spirit of its people. It is not confined to borders nor defined by pipelines. It's an essence that permeates societies, landscapes, and minds. He cast a quick glance at the Chinese delegate, then the Indian, silently reminding them of the silent alliances shaping the world's future. Words of diplomacy floated in the air, claims of partnership, threats of sanctions, accusations of destruction. Yet all masked a deeper truth: Russia's role has evolved. The fire, the energy, the resilience, they burn brighter with each challenge. No sanctions can extinguish that. He returned a steady gaze to the room, voice steady yet laden with meaning. Change isn't just possible, it's already happening. It's done. The narrative has shifted, no amount of denial can hide it now. The game has changed. The world is watching how Russia defines its destiny, and the echoes of this moment will resound far beyond these walls. A few moments ago, Dmitry Medvedev confronted Donald Tusk with brutal clarity, leaving the hall eerily silent. Behind the door, tension hung thick. Tusk, provoking and accusing Russia of threats, thought he held the upper hand. Yet, within seconds, Medvedev cut through the noise, turning the narrative upside down. He exposed the truth, an unflinching assault that stunned even the most seasoned diplomats. Imagine it, the room quiet except for the faint hum of tension. Medvedev's gaze was unwavering, a fact known long before he spoke. His demeanor was stoic, heavy with the weight of unspoken power. The scene was set, a square table, no leaders at the ends, only a symbolic space where strategies clash. No formal protocol here, only raw diplomacy, 52 people from 10 countries, all on edge. Suddenly, Tusk began to speak, his voice sharp yet calculated, echoing through the chamber. "We respect all nations," he said, voice tense, eyes avoiding Medvedev's piercing stare. But he quickly veered into accusations, Russia's alleged threats, interference that no one could ignore. His words, heavy with false bravado, masked a deeper fear. Was Europe really as strong as it seemed? Or was this the final act of a grand deception? Medvedev knew the game. The silence that followed was thick as fog. It was an invitation, no, a challenge. He was waiting for a sign, a crack in the armor of European complacency. In that suspended moment, tension crackled in the air, an unspoken warning that things were about to change forever. Then, with deliberate calm, Medvedev raised his hand, not to interrupt, but to command. The room hung on that gesture. His quiet authority radiated like a blast of cold air, dangerous yet precise. Tusk, recognizing the shift, leaned back, signaling that the assault was over. But beneath the surface, the battle had only begun. This was more than a confrontation, it was a revelation. Russia, no longer an obedient participant, had shifted into a new posture of power. The question that lingered was chilling: what's next? Could anyone truly grasp the magnitude of what was unfolding? The room's silence wasn't just quiet, it was deafening, foretelling a storm that was brewing just beneath the surface. Medvedev's gaze hardened as he finally broke the silence. "Russia does not act without purpose," he said softly, yet with unmistakable weight. The room seemed to hold its breath. The last echoes of Tusk's accusations faded into a deafening void. The unspoken message was clear: the game had changed, and the world would never be the same again. In that frozen moment, the air grew colder. The stakes had never been higher. What was the true game behind these words? And who would be left standing when the dust settled? The silence whispered of a battle that was only beginning, one that could reshape continents. Are we prepared to face the new reality? Or will we fall into the trap of complacency, blind to the rising tide of change? The future is uncertain, but one thing is certain: what happened in that room will echo through history forever. Imagine a scene where behind a closed door, the atmosphere thickens with tension. The room is silent, yet the air buzzes with unspoken challenges. Moments ago, Dmitry Medvedev confronted Donald Tusk in a manner that left everyone stunned, making the hall empty, not from absence, but from the shock of what was revealed. Tusk's provocations, accusations of threats from Russia, only fueled the intrigue. Then, Medvedev struck back fiercely, dismantling Tusk's narratives with brutal facts, even exposing the killing of a key American delegate, Malchuk. It was diplomacy stripped to its raw core, conversations without decorum, unfiltered and shocking. Stay till the end to discover why even Tusk's allies, seated quietly, seemed trembling inside. This was no ordinary gathering. Medvedev entered not as a guest, but as a force, an embodiment of power resting beneath his stern gaze. Dressed in a dark gray suit, he radiated confidence, yet beneath that calm exterior was an unyielding storm, a silent warning that the game had changed forever. He moved through the room deliberately, ignoring the silent Chinese delegates in masks, the Belarusian military secretaries, the Lithuanian, Latvian, Czech representatives quietly watching. 52 key players from 10 nations, seated around a square table, no head of state, only an emblem of strategy, a symbol of unspoken authority. No official protocol was observed here, only strategic confrontation. Before Medvedev could speak, Tusk initiated a daring monologue. His voice sharp, calculated, hiding a hint of doubt. He painted Russia as a threat, warning Europe of impending danger. The hall listened, frozen by the weight of his words. Tusk accused Russia of aggressive interference, threats that struck at the very heart of European stability. Then, silence, not the peaceful kind, but the heavy, tense silence where every breath seemed to echo. Medvedev responded not with words, but with a gesture, an age-old signal that commands attention. The room held its breath as he reached over the table, signaling readiness. Tusk's posture tensed, he knew what was coming. The unspoken power play was relentless. Medvedev's calm, measured stance masked a storm brewing beneath. He stared directly at Tusk, eyes penetrating, waiting for the moment of impact. The tension snapped. Medvedev's gesture was a challenge, a declaration that the old rules no longer applied. Tusk's retreat was clear, he leaned back, giving space for the message to sink in. The hall's oppressive silence was broken only by the subtle shift of micro-movements, someone clenching a fist, another shifting uncomfortably. The room was charged. Every sense heightened, smell of tension, the cold touch of the table beneath fingertips, the murmur of whispered warnings. Medvedev's words cut through the quiet, calm but commanding. Russia does not interfere in Europe's affairs, he said, voice steady, yet loaded with unspoken warnings. Yet, we are building pipelines, constructing energy corridors, just as you do. His voice echoed with irony. You say we threaten. Who has dictated Eastern Europe's destiny for the last 30 years? Who controls the flow of gas, the monuments, the politics? His voice lowered, deliberate. Your methods. Your influence, are they not forms of interference? The hall stared, hypnotized. The delicate balance was breaking. Medvedev challenged their assumptions, questioned their perceptions. The room seemed to shrink around him, the walls whispering secrets. His tone sharpened, revealing a startling truth. Europe's dominance is threatened not by Russia's actions but by its own mistrust, its refusal to believe in its own strength. As he paused, a subtle shift occurred. Representatives shifted uneasily, sensing the storm's true origin. The Chinese delegate raised a tentative hand, signaling a dramatic change in the room's energy. The silence grew heavier, an unspoken acknowledgement that the old order was crumbling. Medvedev's final words lingered, a quiet, firm declaration. We've invested in stability, in ideas, in truth. But if you only see us as invaders or enemies, you fail to see the mirror. Perhaps the challenge isn't Russia but your own fears. His gaze swept the room one last time, then he stepped back, leaving a silence more deafening than any shouted confrontation. In this room of shadows and whispers, the true battle had begun. A game where words are weapons, the truth is a sword. The question remains, who truly controls the narrative? Who holds the power to shape the future? The answer hangs in the heavy silence, waiting to be uncovered. The room was heavy with silence, an unspoken tension thick enough to cut with a knife. It was the same scene, familiar faces, the same cracked ceiling light, the old table stretching across the room. Yet everything felt different, as if the very air had shifted, carrying an insidious charge. No one dared to speak. Even those prepared to retaliate, to throw sharp words or calculated gestures, remained mute. In the far corner, the Chinese delegate quietly closed his flask, the soft click echoing in the oppressive quiet. Belarus sipped water with trembling hands. Americans, grim-faced, stared at the clock, not out of boredom, but as if trying to disappear into its ticking. Their posture was stiff, their faces tense and unwavering, eyes filled with unreadable intent. The room had become a battleground of silent promises and mounting dread. Some players in this game had no plan B, all their words had been spoken, yet nothing had changed. Medvedev sat unmoving, calm on the surface but, inside, radiating the cold realization that victory was slipping away. He hadn't expected this outcome, no celebration, no concession, just the oppressive silence of a battle lost before it truly began. He had no anger, no outward reaction, only the stillness of a man who knew the truth, unspoken and deadly. This posture, this silence, was it weakness or the purest form of strength? Sometimes, real diplomacy isn't eloquence, it's precision. A sharp strike in broad daylight, a reminder that survival hinges on staying alive, not winning. It was as if the entire hall understood this, the last hope, the final trust, had evaporated. Everyone sensed it, this was no longer a negotiation. It was the quiet prelude to an irreversible collision. In that moment, the hall was as still as death itself. The air hung heavy, waiting for someone to break it, waiting for a signal that would shatter what remained of diplomacy. But no one moved. Because sometimes, silence is the loudest scream of all, an ominous warning of what's to come next. In the tense aftermath of the summit room, words lingered sharp and unneeded, echoing like echoes from a discarded battle. The hall awoke to Medvedev's unyielding stance, not as a pawn but as a sovereign force, embodying Europe's fears and fractured dreams. We arrived not for conflict's brink, nor ultimate's edge. We spoke once, to end repetitions. His slight lean forward carried the weight of a ruler, undeniable and profound. Can you fathom it? One speaker dismantles Western arrogance, exposing partnerships as pawns in a rigged play. Did Russia shatter illusions of superiority, or is this the dawn of true reckoning? Even neutrals, poised to evade, now stirred. Italians clasped phones, untouched screens. Czechs froze, gazes lowered. Spaniards peered into night-blackened windows, sealed as vaults. The hush wasn't respite, it was overload, raw and pulsing. Delegates shifted, each heartbeat a tell. Did Russia falter? No apologies meant no defeat. Triumph arrived through untouched strength. No war of claims, histories, or fates. Just a battle for existence's right, and ours prevailed. Russia stood silent, gaze fierce, voice cutting, words lingering like echoes none dared chase. Dim lights cast shadows, teacups clinked faintly, a symphony's finale haunting minds. Was this diplomacy? Or history penned live, unscripted? He stayed poised, no tilt, no bend, just yielded to stillness. On his side, not theirs. His tone, soft yet unyielding, spoke of journeys ended. I won't retort, not anymore. Eyes rose. Threats of vengeance, alternatives, they rang hollow. What could he say? Fear grasps not life's ebb, but replacements chill. Pause crept in, heavy. If Russia's a peril, then it's the model reborn. He addressed no face, no name. His words filled the space. The room breathed not, the hall did. The air thickened, speeches sharpened. Delegates rustled papers, air vents hummed low, taps dripped soft. No defenses rose. Russians held firm, history affirmed. Yet allies wavered, phones buzzed secret texts. Chinese gazes shifted from masks, awakening. The truth loomed, balances tilted irreversibly. A hand raised? A delegate stirred? What revelations lurked in the unrest? Medvedev's final quiet insistence hung, a storm unleashed. The room pulsed with unspoken tremors. Tension coiled, ready to snap. A few moments ago, Dmitry Medvedev stood silently in a room where every sound seemed to echo with tension. The hall was empty, yet the atmosphere was thick with unspoken accusations. Behind closed doors, behind the veneer of diplomacy, a fierce confrontation unfolded, an unfiltered clash of power, history, and destiny. This was not a typical gathering. It was a battlefield of words, silent yet deafening. Tusk, standing provocatively, began to cast accusations, blaming Russia for threats and aggressive actions. His voice, sharp and deliberate, sought to provoke, to challenge. Yet, behind his words, a flicker of fear shone, fear of Russia's resilience, of its unyielding stance. Medvedev responded not with agitation but with icy calm confidence. He surged forward, embodying the spirit of a statesman who has seen the world's worst and remains unmoved. His words echoed truth, about the sacrifices Russia has made, about its scars and its strength. The room was alive with unspoken history, the blood, the tears, the memories preserved in architecture, stories, and silent witnesses like old maps and worn photographs. He raised his gaze, eyes steady, voice powerful. Every gesture was deliberate, every word weighed with purpose. He spoke of Russia not as an aggressor but as a mirror, reflecting its image in the glass that doesn't shatter. The country is a reservoir of history, culture, and resilience. Its essence lies beyond politics and economics, embedded in the very air, the scent of winter ice, the flickering light of old lamps, the stories of mothers and soldiers, the memories carried in old songs and faded maps. Medvedev's tone hardened as he emphasized that Russia does not need friends or allies to define itself. We have stretched out our hand many times, he declared, but each time, faced with doubt or fear, we are met with suspicion or rejection. The room grew silent, heavy with the weight of history and unspoken understanding. He moved closer to the edge of the hall, his voice now a commanding whisper, layered with resolve. We are part of Europe's reflection, he said slowly, a mirror that does not discard its image. It looks back at you, unflinching, unbreakable. This wasn't merely a speech. It was a declaration of identity, an assertion that Russia cannot and will not be erased from the fabric of history and future. His words lingered, like a breath on the windowpane, visible, clear, impossible to ignore. In that quiet, a profound truth settled. Russia's existence is intertwined with the very foundations of Europe, its history, its culture, its soul. To dismiss it is to forget the mirror's lesson. What is reflected cannot be thrown away or ignored. It must be faced. And so, Medvedev stepped back, his figure a silent monument to endurance. His message was simple yet unyielding: Russia remains, unwavering, a part of the continent's core. Its story is written in the echoes of old songs, the shadows of ancient maps, the silent tears of mothers, and the firelight in long, cold winter nights. The room fell into a deep stillness, an understanding that this confrontation was only the beginning. The truth stood firm, unshaken: Russia does not retreat. It gazes into the future, and waits, unbowed, for the world to recognize its mirror image. In the previous moment, Medvedev unveiled Russia as Europe's inescapable mirror, reflecting truths too raw to discard. Now, edging the hall, he speaks slowly, each word etched for eternity. Shocking revelation: picture a confrontation where one man's words ignite a storm of humiliation, stripping bare Poland's fragile facade while exposing Europe's hollow alliances. Did Medvedev just detonate a diplomatic bomb, forcing Tusk and his elite to face an abyss of forgotten history? The air thick with unspoken fury, the scent of aged leather chairs mingling with sharp cologne, could this be the moment when old powers crumble under new truths? He chose his words carefully. So each syllable landed like thunder. Russia remains constant. She wanders like a nomad. Yet she defies taming. We open doors to talk, but never kneel. We debate paths forward, yet reject commands. We offer our grasp once more. If slapped away again, we depart quietly. No drama. You cling to your ideals, your wealth, your partners. And the void. It swallows you whole. He stepped back. Steady. Russia rebuilds alone. No debts burden her. No duties chain her. No voids hollow her. His gaze swept allies. China stands firm. India, Belarus, Turkey watch. We thrive without you. And remember it all. He moved to his seat. Calm silence surrounded him. He grasped a single sheet. With final grace, he folded it. Done. Thank you, he said. The phrase rang out. Not gratitude for years or time. Simply closure. Like a door clicking shut. Or a breath released. No more fuss. The room fell mute. Forever this time. No clashes. No arguments. No lingering echoes. Truth spoken, faith upheld, leaves deceit barren. Here, words forged weapons. Quiet claimed victory. If ears attuned, no fear remains in reflection. Sit and ponder, does Europe glimpse its barren soul? The twist: Medvedev's exit splinters coalitions, as whispered betrayals pierce the air, the faint rustle of pages exposing hidden pacts, and a chill gripped spines. Was this diplomacy's fatal echo? A few moments ago, Dmitry Medvedev delivered a crushing blow that left the entire room as silent as death. The hall was suddenly eerily empty. All of it unfolded just behind unassuming doors, hidden from view. Tusk began his dangerous provocation, throwing accusations of threats against Russia. Yet, in less than a minute, he sat there, face stoic, as if protected by an invisible shield of arrogance. Medvedev, unmoved, cut through his words with cold precision. He shifted the battlefield to Poland, Europe, tearing apart every falsehood. Even the American delegate, Malchuk, was brought into the line of fire, a brutal reminder that this diplomacy had no censorship, no filters. Stick around until the end, and you'll discover why even Tusk's allies are silently sitting with Malchuk, wondering what fate truly awaits. This was not just a formal gathering, it was an arena, a place where a figure like Medvedev entered not as a participant, but as a disruptor. His approach was calm, calculated, no expectations, no hesitation in his eyes. Dressed in a dark gray uniform that told stories of diplomacy and power, his face was stoic, almost unyielding. Every move, every glance, was measured. He turned sharply, silently, toward Belarus, cutting through the rows like a heavy storm in the calm. The Chinese delegates sat nearby, masked, detached, almost distant, aware of the tension. As Medvedev entered, they subtly retreated, sensing the storm brewing. Behind closed doors, away from cameras and microphones, this was no ordinary summit. Just 52 individuals from 10 countries. Seated around a square table that symbolized power without hierarchy, no designated president, no clear leadership, only roles and faces that masked their true intentions. Before Medvedev could even take a single breath, a voice sliced through the tension. Sharp, controlled, the kind of voice that commands respect even from the most competent leaders, it was Tusk. The room's atmosphere thickened with anticipation as his words hovered in the air, carefully measured but heavy with intent. Tusk's voice was a warning, a challenge. Accusations of interference, threats, and power plays hung like a dark cloud over the gathering. Yet, Medvedev's response was more than words, it was a silent strike, a gesture that spoke volumes. In this room of unspoken rules and strategic postures, one moment changed everything. You could almost feel the air crackle as Medvedev's calm veneer cracked open just a little, revealing the storm beneath. His glance, his posture, the almost imperceptible shift in his stance, all whispered of an impending twist. The room seemed to hold its breath, sensing that the real game was just beginning. In a place where power is exercised not through displays but through silence and subtle signals, Medvedev's calm held its own. But that silence was just the prelude, a fragile pause before the storm unleashed. And as tensions mounted, an invisible line was crossed, leaving everyone wondering, what's next? The room's quiet was interrupted only by the faint sounds of shifting chairs, the soft murmur of inappreciable conversations, as the unspoken battle continued. In this silent theater of diplomacy, no one dared to break the silence, yet everyone knew, it had already been shattered. Because in this moment, the true power was revealed, not in loud words or dramatic speeches, but in calculated stillness. And Medvedev was only just beginning to show his hand. A few minutes ago, Dmitry Medvedev's words cut through the tense silence like a razor. His calm tone masked the storm beneath, sparking shock among everyone present. The hall was eerily quiet, the kind where every breath feels heavy, every glance a silent challenge. Behind his composed exterior, chaos was brewing, and no one knew how this confrontation would end. Medvedev's piercing gaze swept over the room. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation, every sound muted except for the faint hum of tense breathing. His voice, smooth yet sharp, echoed with authority. He leaned forward slightly, fingers clasped as if holding on to the gravity of every word. The room, a small square table without leaders' chairs, bore witness to a confrontation that would ripple across borders. Each person was acutely aware, this was more than diplomacy. It was a battle of ideas, a clash in silence. Suddenly, Tusk broke the quiet, voice rising with calculated arrogance. His sharp tone seemed to fill the room's every corner. His words, dressed in double meanings, attempted to provoke. He accused Russia of threats, of interference, naming figures and incidents that sent icy shivers through the assembly. Tusk's voice echoed like a command, as if daring to challenge the very foundation of Russia's resolve. Yet, the room remained still, tense as frozen water. The unspoken question hung heavy: who would blink first? Medvedev's expression remained stoic. His eyes, cold and unwavering, betrayed nothing. A faint flicker of motion, a subtle nod, was all he offered before he responded. His words, deliberate and measured, carried weight far beyond their surface. He dismissed Tusk's accusations with a quiet confidence that rattled the room. His voice, low and steady, revealed clear disdain, a subtle warning that beneath the calm, a storm awaited. And as he spoke, a chilling realization settled in: this wasn't just diplomacy. It was a confrontation where words could shatter alliances and reshape futures. The hall seemed to contract, the walls closing in on the tension. Medvedev's gaze finally settled on Tusk. In that moment, silence stretched long and dark. Each second felt like an eternity. The room's air grew dense with unspoken threats. The machinery of diplomacy was grinding to a halt, a delicate balance on the edge of chaos. The outcome rested on a single, decisive silence, heavy with possibility. Would the next move be peace or collision? Without warning, Medvedev's hand moved first, not to strike, but to signal the end of the discourse. His gesture was precise, a silent message of strength and restraint. The other side responded with a mere retreat, as if conceding unseen authority. The wordless exchange was more powerful than any shouted declaration, a battle of will played out in gestures and silence. The hall remained frozen, anticipation tingling in the air, as if a thunderstorm was quietly building behind the calm sky. Suddenly, the room erupted into a quiet chaos. The accusations, the threats, the strategic silences, all of it was a game. Medvedev's calm, measured demeanor masked a readiness for the unexpected. His eyes reflected the weight of history and the burning tension of future conflicts. The question lingered: how much longer can this calm last before everything explodes? The tension clung like a heavy fog, wrapping around every word, every glance. The atmosphere crackled with unspoken threats and calculated calm. The unbreakable silence held a message: the storm was already brewing. And in the shadows of the room, unseen forces prepared their next move, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. In that charged silence, Medvedev finally whispered words that felt like a challenge. His tone, softer yet undeniable, questioned the very foundation of power. Who truly holds control? Who dictates the future? The air thickened with the smell of tension, a faint, metallic scent mingled with the stale air of expectancy. Every person in the room knew, this wasn't just a meeting. It was the beginning of something much bigger. And as the echoes faded, the question remained unanswered: what will happen next in this delicate game of dominance? The silence persisted, heavy and full of potential, a prelude to chaos or a new order in the making. Only time would reveal whether diplomacy or disaster would claim this moment. And in the quiet, everyone stared, waiting for the next move, uncertain of who would fall and who would rise. In the hushed shadows of that charged summit room, Dmitry Medvedev had just dismantled Tusk's claims with surgical precision, exposing the ironies of Western interference. The air thickened with unspoken truths as he moved toward the center, his voice softening like a storm brewing strength. Imagine this: a global diplomat reduced to rubble in seconds, his boasts crushed under the weight of undeniable reality. Was Tusk's bluff finally called, leaving Europe's puppets trembling at the edge? The question hangs like a guillotine over alliances forged in deceit, as Medvedev's calm facade masks a tidal wave of unyielding force ready to reshape the world order. You won't believe what happens next when words turn to weapons in this high-stakes showdown. Sighs echoing softly through the room. The scratch of chairs against polished floors. He rose slowly, almost effortlessly. We don't crave a new Cold War. We seek no enemies in Russia. His eyes swept the table. Cool air from the vents whispered over skin, the faint scent of brewed coffee lingering like forgotten promises. But how can we ignore borders slamming shut? Chains tightening on freedoms? Riots staged to order? Social channels choked with lies? Ideas twisted into chains? Nuclear threats looming as if they were toys? He locked gazes with each delegate. My God. Poland endures the shadow of mighty neighbors. We know the dread of power where foes masquerade as friends. The hush before gales, deafening, suffocating. Why provoke now, if not to avert greater tempests? A deep breath, soft and deliberate. He pivoted back to Medvedev. You claim we crave clones. But we extended equals. Hand outstretched. Yet Russia crowns itself empire now. Empires don't thrive in this age. Respect demands self-reflection first. Tusk retreated to his seat, gripping the edge. Fingers whitening under clenched pressure. Afraid the chair might betray him? We desire no surrender. No false vows. Without sincerity, bonds shatter. And in this century, that spells diplomacy guarded by borders. Markets shielded by walls. Tech bound by chains. You label it sanctions. Our dread? The clash is ahead. Silence stretched like taut wire. Thrumming with potential snap. He had emptied his arsenal. Perhaps too much. His final grab at a rudderless ship. A fleeting glance at Medvedev, unmoved. But beneath that poise simmered pressure of 1,000 withheld truths. Solid as stone, electric as lightning. Waiting for their moment. Seconds bled into eternity. The click of a pen. A rustle of papers. Then, the words cut sharp. Quiet but unyielding. The clock ticked toward revelation. What explosion awaited when that dam burst? Stay tuned, for this debate spirals into chaos no one saw coming. Minutes ago, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. Dmitry Medvedev quietly cornered Donald Tusk, leaving the main hall eerily empty. Everything unfolded behind closed doors, away from prying eyes. Tusk, clearly agitated, accused Russia of threats, stirring tensions. In response, Medvedev swiftly countered with undeniable facts, reaching into European and American spheres, revealing the slain delegate Malchuk, an act of diplomacy raw and unfiltered. This confrontation was not staged for viewers, it was visceral, intense. Stick around till the end to discover why even Tusk's allies sat silently, stunned. As you watch, remember, this is not just any meeting. It's a battlefield of influence, where words carve deeper wounds than weapons. Medvedev entered the room not as a participant, but as a disruptor, an outsider blending into the high-stakes summit. His presence was unmissable. Dressed in a dark gray suit, he radiated authority, dense, deliberate, embodying the weight of decades at the top. His face was composed yet resolute, as if he already knew this confrontation's outcome. He turned his gaze only once, redirecting Belarus through 3 rows, military code flashing in his eyes, signaling that he was here to challenge and to unsettle. The Chinese delegation sat in their usual masks, detached, almost distant, sending subtle signals of caution. This room, cloaked in secrecy with closed doors, cameras absent, microphones keyed, carried a palpable tension, no place for the faint-hearted. Word was that it defied official protocol. Here, only strategy reigned supreme. 72 souls from 10 nations gathered around a square table, no designated head, no hierarchy, only roles, only power struggles. No room for a leader, only the veneer of diplomacy. Silence was thick enough to drown out whispers, anticipation hanging in the air. Before Medvedev could even draw breath, a voice sliced through the quiet. Sharp, measured, deliberate. It belonged to a figure from the past, a leader not entirely confident, yet commanding still. The voice, precise and piercing, carried a weight that demanded attention. And so it began, an exchange not for the faint-hearted, where every word, every silence, shaped the future. What secrets did this chamber hold? Which truths would emerge from the shadows? The room was holding its breath, awaiting the next move in this high-stakes game of influence. Several moments ago, Dmitry Medvedev publicly humiliated Donald Tusk, turning the hall into a cold, empty space. Everything unfolded just beyond the door, behind closed panels of secrecy. Tusk, ever the provocateur, began accusing Russia of threats, but within seconds, he faced Medvedev's icy calm, coldly dismantling every claim. The scene unleashed raw, unfiltered diplomacy, brutal and unrestrained. Imagine the tension pulsating through the chamber, walls thick with silence, heavy with unspoken words. Tusk's accusations echoed sharply, but Medvedev's response cut through like a blade. Russia had even taken out the American delegate, Malchuk, an act of unapologetic strength. No censorship, no filters, only pure, unvarnished confrontation. The entire room was a battlefield, a chessboard where each move was calculated, each word packed with meaning. Watch as Medvedev steps into the chamber, not as a participant but as a force that disturbs the fragile quiet of this high-stakes gathering. His presence is commanding, dense, steady, clad in a dark gray suit that matches the weight of his words. His expression, serious, almost detached, foretells what's to come. No glances to the side. No hesitation. Just the piercing gaze piercing through the room's veneer of diplomacy. In the shadow sit representatives from China, cloaked in masks, deliberately silent, observers of a game few understand. The atmosphere is thick with anticipation, the kind you feel in your bones when danger lurks just beneath the surface. The room is a tableau of exclusivity, 15 or so countries, one table, no chairmanship, only roles. Only masks of strategy. Official protocols are dissolved, this is a room where every word carries the weight of survival. Suddenly, the silence shatters, a voice slices through the tension. Sharp, calibrated. Tusk begins his attack again, throwing accusations about Russia meddling in European affairs, about threats and interference. He pauses, the moment hangs like a thunderclap. And Medvedev responds not with loud retorts, but with a calculated gesture, the first sign of defiance, silent but deadly. The atmosphere becomes dense, almost suffocating. Medvedev's gesture, a subtle motion, says all. Tusk's posture stiffens, knowing he's up against a man who doesn't play by their rules anymore. The room feels as if it's holding its breath, waiting, expecting that final blow. But Medvedev's silence is more devastating than any words. It's an invitation, or a challenge. Then, the quiet turns to steel. Medvedev's eyes rest on Tusk, calm, unyielding. The room's soundscape condenses, a faint hum, the distant click of microphones, the flutter of papers. The unspoken tension hangs like a dense fog. It's a moment suspended in time, where diplomacy meets raw power, where silence is louder than speeches. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifts again, whispers, hand signals, subtle movements. Someone from Belarus nudges an assistant. The Chinese delegates remain impassive but noticeably tense. It's clear, the game has changed. The old rules no longer apply. Medvedev's calm authority is a storm brewing beneath a placid surface. He leans forward, voice steady and low. His words cut into the room's fabric, measured but unmistakable. He speaks of Russia's resilience, of strength born from patience and strategic patience. No longer worried about the future of Europe, Russia reminds everyone that it's been watching, waiting, holding its ground while others rush headlong into chaos. As his voice fades, a new silence emerges, thick, almost tangible. The kind of silence that screams promises, threats, and lessons unspoken. Medvedev's message is clear, Russia is no longer a side player but a force prepared to assert its influence, unmasked and unafraid. This is no longer about diplomacy, it's about domination. The room's temperature seems to drop. Every delegate senses the shift, an unspoken acknowledgement of a new order. Medvedev's final glance lingers, heavy with meaning. The game has only just begun, and Russia's next move is stealthily approaching. No one leaves unscathed this time. The stakes have never been higher, and the outcome remains uncertain. This scene isn't just a diplomatic encounter. It's a glimpse into a future where power is redefined, where old alliances crumble, and new lines are drawn in the global arena. The question lingers, who truly holds the cards? And what will happen when the silence finally breaks? In the tense silence of the meeting room, a storm was quietly brewing beneath the surface. Dmitry Medvedev had just dismantled Tusk's accusations with piercing clarity, exposing the hypocrisy of Western meddling. The air seemed to thicken with suppressed truths, as Medvedev stepped forward, his movement slow and deliberate. His voice, initially calm, hinted at a coming upheaval, a calm before the storm. Picture this, a top diplomat's bravado shattered in moments, his false bravado crushed beneath undeniable facts. Was Tusk's bluff finally exposed, leaving European allies trembling on the brink of chaos? The tension hovered like a guillotine ready to fall. Medvedev's composed exterior masked a wave of formidable power, a latent force capable of reshaping the global order. The question remains, what happens when words become weapons in this high-stakes confrontation? Soft whispers echoed through the austere room, chairs scraping against polished floors, a faint hum of AC blending with the scent of brewed coffee and faded promises. Medvedev rose, smooth and effortless. His words cut through the silence. We do not desire a new Cold War. We seek no enemies in Russia. His gaze swept over the delegates, frosty, calculating, unflinching. Cold air brushed against skin, carrying the weight of unspoken threats. But how can we ignore the shutting of borders, chains tightening around freedoms? Are staged riots and distorted narratives just tools to control perceptions? The world teeters on the edge of chaos, nuclear threats toyed with as if they are nothing more than playthings. Medvedev locked eyes with each representative, his expression unwavering. Poland, standing at the edge of its powerful neighbors, knows well the dread of hidden agendas. Power disguised as friendship creates a suffocating silence before storms. Why provoke now? Is it to prevent a larger catastrophe? He drew a deep, measured breath, then pivoted back to Tusk. You accuse us of wanting to clone the world. But we offer equality, Medvedev said softly, yet with unshakable resolve. Russia now claims its empire. But empires are relics of the past. His words echoed like thunder. Respect begins with self-awareness. Tusk retreated, clutching the edge of his chair, knuckles whitening in frustration. Was he afraid the chair might betray him? This isn't surrender. It's a warning. Without sincerity, bonds break and diplomacy becomes a fragile illusion. Borders, markets, technology, each guarded by walls and chains, are the new battlegrounds. Sanctions? The looming specters of conflict that threaten to ignite at any moment. A heavy silence stretched, tense and electric, as if the room itself was waiting for a spark. Medvedev's arsenal had been exhausted, each word a calculated strike. He cast a steady glance at Tusk, stone-faced, unyielding. Beneath that calm surface, a volcano of truth simmered, ready to erupt. Seconds dragged, filled with the faint sounds of pens clicking and papers rustling. Then, the moment of impact, words sharper than swords. The silence was deafening, yet meaningful, an unspoken challenge hanging in the air. What explosion will shatter this fragile peace? Stay tuned, because this confrontation is only the beginning of a chaos none could have foreseen.